And Marcus, as we move into these questions, we've got the poll that is up from our earlier survey and the answers. And you talked about how one of the things that stood out from your original point there is that you believe that 100% of our jobs are going to be in some way affected by AI, which makes a lot of sense. And I do think it's also interesting you mentioned that there's kind of this cultural narrative that things are just they're really, really being impacted in a significantly negative way. But you found through some of your research that it's really only about 1%, which is obviously, it's not insignificant, but it's a small, small number than maybe what people perceive to be true. So let's go ahead and dive in, and we're going to roll up our sleeves, and we're going to go to maybe the question that people are most concerned about most right now, which is around how will AI affect not just jobs, but how will AI affect my job? And
Yeah.
even more specifically, will AI lead to me being laid off? So we're just going to dive right in. And so the first question that I have for you is, with layoffs feeling like they're becoming more and more prominent and more frequent, and with AI frequently identified or perceived as the root cause, should we be worried about our jobs currently?
Yeah. And the short answer there is no. Now, again, that's hard to stomach if you're a part of that 1% that has been impacted recently by these layoffs. But the reality is, you shouldn't be concerned about your job in terms of will I have one? You should absolutely be concerned about your job changing. And here's the thing, Corey, this is just my one guy's point of view. I don't think the underlying challenge that we're dealing with is AI or even technology. You know what I think it is? I think it's our willingness to adapt to change. We stink at this as humans, and I don't know why, because we're constantly bombarded with changes in our lives, and yet we resist it. I think that's the key. Think about how much the world changes now, how frequently and how significantly on a regular basis. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge that we have. We are all going to have greater, what I call change agility. So what I mean by that is our willingness to adapt to change frequently and to do it in an efficient way. I really don't think that it's AI per se. That's just the topic of the day.
I think that's well said. I also, and Marcus, you and I have talked about this, but in our minds, either individually or as a team or as an organization, we traditionally think about planning in terms of a timeline, right? So the closer the thing is, the more control we have of that because we've got more data to be able to make decisions to move maybe a new version of our truth from subjective to objective. So that
Mhm.
becomes kind of our tactical decision making and change management process. And
Yeah.
then further out we go, typically in relation to the further out we go, there's a less prevalence of data for us to make our decisions with. And so therefore things become a bit more nuanced. They become less clear and less objective. So those are more of our strategic decisions that we have to make. And then we go even further out, and now we have it's a longer time period. So we're accounting for maybe a year or 3 or 5 years, even potentially. But then the prevalence of data becomes even less clear and less objective. So it's more subjective, more nuanced, certainly more open for interpretation. And this is where we're now in more of a zone of vision. So it requires
Yeah.
maybe assumptions. It's directional, but it's not like tactical or strategic. It's visionary, it's longer term, and there's less data. But then the next band out, this is where it becomes very challenging, right? Because now we're in a zone of decision making and change that's much more opaque and it's not clear, and it shouldn't be clear because we don't have near the data that we would need in order to make more of an objective change. So this could be maybe a decade out with a little bit of data. And so we're not able to make those objective decisions, and therefore we feel less at ease about the change that's occurring. So I think there are two examples of where things are less clear, but it is required of us to make more tactical changes. So whereas we don't have a lot of data, that should be more of like a systems level evolution, right? That is going to require much more of a broader mindset. But I think just a couple of examples. Number one, think about COVID, right? So in 2020, where it's late February, early March, and what we experienced culturally as a society is literally a systems level evolution where very few of us knew what was going on. However, we had to immediately make tactical changes. So we have no data and we've got to make tactical changes, and it creates kind of a whiplash effect. And I think although AI has been in existence for a long, long time, in terms of like the cultural tipping point and how it's beginning to really affect us, we're having maybe, and I would love to get your thoughts on that, a bit of a similar kind of a whiplash effect where all of a sudden, what has been a systems level evolution that's been evolving for decades for the common person, all of a sudden now AI, it's requiring us to make tactical decisions, and therefore it feels a bit like a whiplash in terms of our change dynamic. So we don't have a lot of data that's not tactical. We're not clear. We don't have an easy runway into this. It feels like we've been kind of like ushered into this at a really fast pace. So could that be creating some of the angst around the necessary changes that we have to think through?
I think it is. I like how you put that. I like how you talked about the different kind of levels out into the future. And the farther out we get, the less data that we have. Which is why I think our mindset and our attitude are so important when we consider the future. So, you mentioned at the onset, Corey, that I've got an affinity for hope. And just to put some, definition and context around that, in the world of work, I see hope as the active belief in a better future. And so I think you and I were talking previously, Corey, about how important that is to have a vision, to be able to use what data you do have to extrapolate what can I do now. And then the other thing I'll point out, you mentioned the term at some point in your preamble there, change management. And I just want to encourage everybody, especially those folks that are in their offsite, to reconsider that terminology. Because change management, that old school kind of approach to top-down communication, I don't think it works very well, especially with the next generation. I will try not to make too many generalizations about the generations, despite how much fun it can be. But I would encourage us to start talking about change enablement,
Yeah, it's good.
empowering people to change, encouraging them to change. What if we were the ones driving the change versus it happening to us? So I think that's an important consideration as well.
Well, and I love that because your definition of an active belief in a better future, that does not correspond with change management because change management is about creating our current future. So change enablement says, no, it is better. It's generative. It's not about maintaining like it's generative. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. And it certainly doesn't mean that it's going to be crystal clear, but that kind of level of tension of stepping into it, and then to be able to have the frame and a hopeful frame of saying it can be better, it will be better. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. That's a different
Yeah.
conversation. And in fact, it can't just be easy. And so maybe we can move then into a little bit of you helping define what the current reality is with AI. So I think that if we looked at like the hype of AI, but then also the reality of AI, can you talk about both and maybe some of the significant discrepancies between the AI hype in the workplace, but also like the AI reality?
Yeah, if you all are familiar with Gartner's hype cycle, they literally have like a chart that shows the hype of new technologies, and we are at the peak of that hype for Gartner's graph on that. So it is very hyped up, and the reality is, again, going back to the event that I just went to, only 1 in 5 organizations actually achieve any sort of measurable ROI from their AI investment. So we are in the early days here. However, I do think we're not far away from experiencing some value. And in fact, I went to another event this year, the HR Technology Conference, and I saw the Chief Human Resource Officer from IBM speak. Her name's Nicole Lamoureux. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name right, but it was so interesting. So she talked about their use of what they call Ask HR. IBM has their Watson technology, right? And so they started developing this chatbot back in, I think it was 2017 or 2019, and they were trying to roll it out to the HR organization at IBM. IBM had at the time over 300,000 employees, okay? And here's what's interesting. So I don't know about you all, but the IBM organization, the HR organization within IBM actually measured their net promoter score, if you're familiar with that measurement. And at the time that they were rolling this out, they were a plus 19. If you're familiar with the NPS score, that's a good score, right?
Yeah.
So they rolled out this new Ask HR. And what they did is they burned the boats, Corey, meaning they shut off any other access to HR. Don't call us, don't stop by, don't email. We want you to start every kind of question or request that you have for HR with this Ask HR chatbot. And it went really bad. And it's because back then they didn't have, generative AI, they didn't have
Right.
chat GPT like capabilities. And so everybody hated it. Their net promoter score for the HR function in IBM dropped from plus 19 to negative 35.
Wow.
But they kept with it. And they've gotten to the point now where literally every single person at IBM, 300,000 people, not only use this Ask HR function to submit, basic questions and requests, they're doing it for things like changing somebody's compensation or a promotion or a transfer. All of it goes through this tool. And do you know that it almost never hits a human being? Think about that. So I want to give you a huge raise, Corey. As long as it hits the parameters that have been set, why do I have to engage a human being to ask that question? Do you realize how transformative that will be for the
Yes.
discipline of HR if they don't have to handle all of those administrative transactional questions and requests? And you know what else, Corey? Do you know what the net promoter score of IBM's HR department is today? Plus 74. So it's
Which is,
triple what it was
yeah.
before.
And that's literally unheard of. The Net Promoter Score, for those not familiar with it, there's an external version of it, but also an employee version of it. And it really centers around one question. And I would bet, and I'm not a betting person, but if I were, I would bet that everybody has, at a minimum, received a Net Promoter Score question after you've purchased a product or you've a plane ticket or you've had an experience. And the question is very simply this: on a scale of 1 to 10, what is the likelihood that you would refer this product, service, or experience to somebody else, right? And so you can do this also internally as well. It's the employee net promoter score based on the same methodology. So one question, it is interesting. Net promoter score, it's a lagging indicator. So this is a downstream effect, which means that one of the challenging parts about if you only think about net promoter, if that's your only data point, then it's kind of difficult to respond because you're naturally going to be responding in more of a lagging type of a phase of the process. And so I want to come back to one of the words that you said a little bit earlier that I would love to get some more definition and clarity on because we're starting to hear it. It's a little bit more normal and mainstream, and it's the word generative AI. So I know that AI has gone through rapid evolutions. We're now in this generative phase of the AI evolution. So can you please break it down to this mindset right here with me? Just if you could break it down into the elementary pieces of what it is. What is generative AI and why is it so amazing? So why is it so different than the previous phase?
Yeah, so the previous phase, I would suggest we kind of focused initially, and most people are probably familiar with the term of RPA or robotic process automation. So in that case, what we did is we said, what are some administrative transactional functions that we can automate? So it used to go through, 10 layers of approvals and people would have to click, yes, I approve. And then we realized, why don't we just automate that and take the human beings out of the equation? So for example, I want to transfer somebody in the organization. As long as it meets all these parameters, we can actually set that up so it automatically happens, right? So that's a simple thing because there's not a whole lot of discrepancy from one transaction to the next, right? So there's pretty standard, approach to doing that. Where generative comes into play, generative artificial intelligence, and then we'll go to agentic AI next, Corey, because that's what people are talking about the most is,
Mhm.
okay, now when it comes to doing things, I can kind of get a head start. The way that I use it all the time is instead of starting with a blank piece of paper, if I'm going to write an article or I'm going to create a presentation, I use ChatGPT most of the time to
Mhm.
generate some ideas and text and context for what I'm attempting to do. So in the world of HR, we see that, initially with things like just job descriptions. You should never write a job description from scratch again because you can have, generative AI help you with that. But the real value, Corey, lies in agentic AI, and that's where it's not only automating those things that RPA did previously, but it's actually using its own discretion to make decisions about things that might have some ambiguity. And that's
Mhm.
where it's like augmenting human intelligence versus just automating it. Hopefully that
Yeah.
it makes sense. I try to keep it relatively simple because I don't understand it beyond that.
Now that's
Hey,
good. So
Marcus,
from automation to augmentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
what,
bet.
what was that question or what was that comment? Hi, guys. Marcus,
Hey,
can you
how are you,
repeat
Heather?
that? Hey, good morning. Can you repeat that really big term that you just mentioned about the augmentation? Like you had said a term there that I just needed to hear again.
When I was referring to the agentic part
Yes. Yes.
of AI, again, I think what we're doing is we're seeing it go from robotic process automation, so just automating those transactional things, to moving to a technology that can actually make decisions for you in
Hmm.
despite there being some ambiguity. And so that's what I would see as more of an augmentation versus just the automation. I don't know if that captured what you were
Yes.
attempting to. Okay.
Yes.
And then
Yep.
and then
Augmentation. Mhm.
and then the agentic. So to springboard off of Heather's question there, can you now talk us through agentic and what does that mean and what are the implications?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? This is where things are going to get so interesting in the future, Corey, because agentic AI, think about it as essentially taking a piece of your job and giving it to a robot for simple terms. Okay. So if you break down a job into, let's say your job has 25 different tasks associated with it. How many of those tasks could you hand off to an agent that can then do the majority of that work for you? My guess is in a lot of jobs, it's probably about half of your tasks you could, with some time and training, give to an agent. So what that's doing is completely changing the potential for organizational structures to evolve away from traditional ways of working. So, I mean, think about that. Like, maybe we don't hire people into jobs in the future. We hire them based on the transferable skills that they have that will allow them to do a variety of jobs based on what we need at that moment. And then
Yeah.
while we are evaluating the work that needs to be done, we determine how much of that work could be done by an agent. So this is where I think things are getting really interesting. So I don't know if you've heard of this, Moderna. Most people have heard of the organization.
Mhm.
They are
Mhm.
literally combining their HR and IT departments, Corey. And the
Wow.
reason they're doing that is I assume their CEO is like, hey guys, we need to get this work done. I don't care who's doing the work. I don't care if it's a human being or an agent or whatever.
Mm.
The work needs to get done. HR, IT, work together, figure it out. Again,
Wow.
like that's for a lot of people like kind of a blowing their mind. Like, what do you mean? Like HR and IT are now the same thing? Maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of like you can't do that, Marcus. Like you can't. And
That's just it.
like
Yeah.
and one of the one of the I think a word that is critically important but unfortunately gets very jargonized is the word innovation. And like
Mhm.
we hear it all the time. We know it's important when we're in the midst of it. It's amazing. But one of my favorite definitions of innovation that it's really, really been helpful for me is that innovation is not a new product, it's not a new service, it is not a new experience, it's not a new department, it's not a new position. Innovation is literally a new way of thinking.
Yeah.
That, like, no matter how it is applied or how it manifests throughout an organization or even within our own lives individually, like to have a new mindset, a new way of thinking, which is really challenging because, it's kind of the difference between deja vu, which is repeatable. If have you ever had deja vu, Marcus?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's wild, right? And I share a story like I know that I'm experiencing deja vu whenever I smell hot baked bread that has cinnamon on it.
Okay.
So random. Okay, now Heather, you're on the West Coast, so you've been to Disneyland. I know you have,
Oh
and you
yeah.
know that that smell, it is coming from the churro cart. Like you know. So I've got four kids. So here's what happens when I smell hot cinnamon bread. I immediately go to a financial trauma of paying for two churros and a Pepsi for a family of six in Disneyland. It's terrible. So that's like my
Uh-huh.
deja vu experience. And so whenever I smell that, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm back to Disneyland and I have no money in my wallet. So, but deja vu,
Oh.
it's repeatable. It's something where we need it to occur over and over and over and over and over and over. It's predictable. It's like if you work in kind of a traditional workplace, your paycheck drops into your account magically every 2 weeks. That's deja vu. And we need that. That's management. But then there's another term that really sparks the whole idea of innovation, which is what I think, Marcus, you're really talking about here. And it's not deja vu, but there's an actual term and it's called vujade. So deja vu is like it's repeatable. Vujade is it's like blue sky. We've not experienced this. It's something that we're moving into the unknown. We're walking through a deep field full of snow, and there are no post holes for us to step in. Like we're the
Yeah.
one carving the path. And that vujade, that's unsettling because it ushers in, like we talked about earlier, more of a subjective way of thinking, more nuanced, more opaque. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just feels different because it's not objective. And that's like
Yeah.
for me, where I think I definitely appreciate the robotic and maybe dabbling in some of the automatic, but like or automation, but like the agentic AI, like that, where that feels very I don't know. Feels very unclear. Maybe it does for other people on the call as well. So, what are a couple of other practical ways that we need to be thinking about how powerful agentic AI is going to be for us?
Well, I like how you put that. Again, good visual, Corey. Just walking through the snow with no post holes, there's no, footprints in front of us. And I think that's what scares people a lot of times, and that's what prevents them from attempting to change. Again, going back to that Gartner event, what they talked about, Kelly and I are recovering HR practitioners, so we know how the discipline has changed over the last, few decades. And, they talked about the HR discipline, Corey, is no longer about the workforce. You know what it's about? It's about the work. How should the work that human
Wow.
beings do change? That's a totally different mindset. So that's a different direction, right? But there's also limitations to this, all of this new technology. And I do want to point out all of this technology is a fundamentally human endeavor, Corey. It's meant to make our lives better, not to make them worse. And so, but there's limitations. I saw a sign on a building recently, and it said, "Hey, chat." It was a building that was under construction, and it said, "Hey, chat GPT, finish this building." It can't, right? There's, it's not going to
Right.
come into the real world and actually do construction work. So I think we have to recognize while some of this is going to be transformative, it's still going to have limitations. But I think what we can do, based on your analogy of walking through the snow, is help people with some guide rails, right? Let's limit this from being you could go west to no, let's go
Yep.
west in this direction down this path. And that
It's
means
good.
giving them guidance and understanding of what the technology is capable of, how they
It's
could
good.
potentially use it, and then let them play with it. I think a lot of people are using Chat GPT more at home than they are at work. And I think that needs to change.
That's interesting. I love that visual of it's kind of like when you're skiing and maybe it's a powder day and but there's a clear boundary line of like, okay, beyond this, it's kind of at your own risk. But everything over here, go ski the powder, like create the first tracks through it, and we want you to go. But just know, like, you may be able to cross this line, but if you do, you're kind of on your own and you're not going to get the same level of support. There's more of an unknown on this side. So creating those guardrails. And I also love the idea of giving people the agency to play in this with the appropriate guidelines, giving them a framework, but also, as we shift to kind of like the leader's role in helping an organization move through this evolution, which you and I have talked about this before. One of my favorite definitions of leadership is that leadership is about disappointing somebody's paradigm at a rate in which they can handle. I love that definition because it talks about the critical importance of rate of change for a leader. Because if you came into the organization and Marcus, you're like, we're going to change, we're going to do it, and by close of day next Tuesday, dot 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 dot, dot. And I'm sitting there
Yeah.
going, I don't disagree with the change, but I cannot fulfill the rate of change expectation. So, like,
Yeah.
talk about how critical it's going to be for a leader to be mindful of not only the tools and the changes and the opportunities, but also the critical importance of maintaining trust with the appropriate rate of change.
Yeah, let's come back to where we started. So you talked about there's, despite the enthusiasm and optimism of this group, there are folks that are a little bit apprehensive about the future. And so when we talked about a leader and a manager providing a hopeful narrative, remember the active belief in a better future. The active piece is important. We have to help people understand that they have, you used the term, Corey, agency or control. That's one of the keys to hope, is I have some control over my life. The second is having a definitive pathway and feeling like I have options, and the ability to do something about the situation that I'm in. So I think that's going to be key as leaders and managers, is to make sure that people understand you do have some control over your life, your career, your work, your job, and you do have pathways forward. But I think that role of being like a frontline manager, Corey, I think it's going to change a lot in the next few years,
Yeah.
and in good ways
What are
and
some of
bad.
those? Yeah. Can you share maybe on both sides? And also, I want to encourage you. I feel like we're kind of at the point in our conversation, like when you're in a plane and you feel like the plane start its descent. Like we're
Yes,
beginning our descent. We're still a long way from landing, but I want to, as we begin our descent, I want to encourage people. If you have a question that you would
please.
like to ask Market, drop it into the chat. Let's make sure that we want to spend the last 10 or so minutes in more of a conversational mode, so that we can leverage Marcus's expertise. So as we begin our descent into our final approach, if you could do that, drop the question into the chat that way, and then I can help facilitate this with Marcus in our last remaining minutes. But Marcus, let's talk about both of the good and maybe the rough or the challenging part of how this is going to impact frontline managers specifically.
Yeah, and be sure and put your seat backs and tray tables in the upright and full position. I
That's
I
right.
travel a lot, so I could probably
Yeah,
do that whole spiel.
that's right.
So from a good perspective, frontline managers, all of those, again, administrative questions and requests that you get. What's my PTO balance? Can I take next Friday off? Do we get Martin Luther King Jr. Day off this year or not? Like all of those will be fielded for you. So as a manager, so much of that administrative minutia will be taken off of your shoulders, which is really good news for a lot of people. Like you should never have to approve an expense report again or a PTO request or any of those things, because the
Wow.
system should look and see, yeah, you've got the time to use. Yes, you filled out or no, you didn't fill out the expense report correctly. You forgot this receipt. The system can ping the employee back and say, hey, you forgot this receipt. All you do is say, oh, is there anything wrong that I need to get involved with? Management by exception, right? From a
And in my case, Marcus, it would be, Corey, you have not completed your expense report again. That's what the AI would tell
Yes.
me. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely. There is that element of it. Now, from a somewhat negative perspective, one of the things I think will change, and I think we're starting to see this at Amazon, is the span of control for a typical manager is going to go way up, meaning you're going to have a lot more direct reports. And the reason for that is you can handle them because you don't have to do all of that administrative stuff. So it's going to be
Interesting.
a weird balance because I think because all of the administrative stuff's going to be done for us, we actually will have maybe some more time to be more interactive with our people,
Yep.
but then we're going to have a bunch more of them than we used to. So it's going to be weird to
That's
see how that
interesting.
plays out. But I think that's why you've seen a lot of layoffs at Amazon, is I think they're trying to remove some of the layers of management and saying, hey, we can have you probably manage 20 to 30 people versus the 10 to 15 you were doing before.
Wow, that is a really significant shift. Like that's been such an entrenched hierarchical way of thinking for so many years. So
Yeah.
that, and that is legitimately threatening to some positions in its current state. I think, wouldn't you agree that the opportunity and the role of a leader in a great organization is to say, okay, we're freeing up capacity because of this increased capacity on this side of the work that we do. A great leader, an innovative leader, a leader that's committed to strengthening their organization is not just going to cut, but they're going to say, let's take full advantage of the change that is upon us. And then how do we repurpose the way that we think about the tasks that are at hand? Or how do we actually engage in what I would call maybe your priority four elements? The priority four is priority four. It's always on your list, but it never gets done. Like if we
Ah,
could only do this type of training or capacity building or skill building for our leaders, our frontline leaders, like what would that look like? If we could only create a cohort where there's a shared experience where we've got cross-departmental collaboration, or we have more listening sessions, or we're able to move from more of a compliance, like a compliance only type of an HR type of a situation to more of a developmental or a pathway type of an HR experience. Like, wouldn't you agree? Like the leaders in an organization and leadership teams have an incredible opportunity in the next months, several years, to be able to shift the actual work that is being done in a really helpful, generative way.
yeah, it's
And
funny.
then-
I've never heard it referred to that way, Corey, as priority four, but I have heard that concept talked about recently. Because again, if you think about the, first level of priority, well, do no harm, compliance, all of that should be done for us. We should have
Yes.
zero involvement in that. So then level two would be kind of more, stuff that we've got to get done on a daily basis. Number three, higher level stuff. But to your point, if we completely redesign work and we're using agents to do so much of what we used to do, then what would happen if we could actually get to that work that we always dreamed about doing but never had the time to do? Again, how transformative could that be for an organization to have folks
Yeah.
working at such a high level versus simply doing the transactional tasks that we assign them on a daily basis? And for
Good.
individuals, how much more meaningful is your work then? It has the
Absolutely.
potential to be huge.
It really does. A question for you, when you think very practically speaking about this unsettling, fast evolving season that we find ourselves in work, specifically as AI continues to move into more and more agentic, what would you say would be maybe a significant breach of trust that a leader would facilitate related to HR and related to AI? So if you think about like, okay, AI, HR, what could a leader do to just annihilate trust within an organization?
There's a lot of things they could do. But so the one that really bubbles to the surface for me, Corey, you know what I don't see a lot in the world of corporate America is authenticity. And I've seen recently a leader use Chat GPT. They had a great quarter, and he's like, I'm going to use Chat GPT to write an email to the team to say, great job. Okay. And he did that, and he basically copied and pasted. Don't ever just copy and paste ChatGPT's first suggestion, okay? Because there's always little idiosyncrasies. I don't know if you saw there was a newspaper article recently that at the base of the article was like, "Do you want me to rewrite this in a certain way?" I was like, "You guys didn't
That's
even
right.
delete that question from
Yeah.
AI."
Would you like me to create a PowerPoint deck for your presentation?
Yeah. So anyway, this guy sent it out, and some of the people that were savvy to, the kind of the vernacular that
Yep.
ChatGPT uses totally called him out. And it ended up having the opposite effect. He was trying to, be like, rah, rah, hey, great job. And instead, his lack of authenticity, I think, eroded that trust, Corey. So that's one example.
Interesting. What about as you think about a leader working with their leadership team? So how can maybe shifting the dialogue more towards the most helpful, supportive, in the midst of all of this change, in the midst of challenging decisions that leadership teams are going to have to make, what are some ways in which a leader can really best support that leadership team, even in the midst of the unknown, knowing that, they're in disruption, but they're in the midst of the unknown? What are some practical ways or even skills that a leader and a leadership team really need to be thinking about building over the course of the near future in order to help usher that transition to occur in the appropriate way for their organization? What are some of those practical skills that you see are important?
The one word that comes to mind, Corey, is personalization. You cannot, if you've got 12 direct reports, you cannot treat them all the same way when it comes to helping them evolve and adapt to this new world of work. Some of them will quickly embrace it. I'm sure you all have people on your team that are using ChatGPT and other, tools daily, and others that are really resistant to try to do it. And they're nervous about it. You can't treat everybody the same way. And so I think that's going to be a key. Coming out of all of this, as we give more to the technology, if we give the new system all the compliance related stuff, and we give the agents all of the transactional administrative stuff, what that means is we as human beings are going to have to get a lot better at communicating with each other. You know why? Because that's the work that will be left to do, is
That's
us
right.
talking to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
that means emotional intelligence and communication and collaboration and empathy. Those are the skills, those human skills, not soft skills,
Yeah,
that we're going
that's
to
good.
have to, be really working to develop. And that's what leaders are going to have to get really good at.
And I love how you qualified that it's not just a soft skill, that it's a human skill.
Yeah.
And I was on a call recently with an individual who we were talking about the whole concept of empathy. It's like, okay, let's break empathy down a little bit because there are some situations that require a different form of empathy. The three
Mm,
main forms of empathy. The first one is just cognitive empathy. Am I aware
yeah.
that person might be going through something that, for example, in this situation, this is a change? So, like cognitively in my brain, I am aware and I am holding space in my mind that Kelly might be experiencing a change. I know that. That's great. Okay, so just knowing that that is a form of empathy. Then the second form, of course, is emotional empathy, where we are committed to holding space not just for the cognitive reality. So in this case, Kelly, I'm kind of working with you in this example, but not only am I aware that you're in the midst of this change, but I'm actually holding space for the emotion that you might be experiencing in that change. I don't necessarily need to mirror that emotion. I'm just holding space for that emotion. I appreciate it. I'm demonstrating appreciative inquiry. I'm showing active listening, all of those things. But then the third component of empathy is it's harder for some people. For others, it's like their natural tendency, and that's compassionate empathy. So that's like, I'm going to walk with you through this. And so one of
Mm.
the things that, Marcus, as you think about, this is where AI, the AI, at least currently, does not have a very good grasp on how to demonstrate cognitive, emotional, and or compassionate empathy. That's where humans play such a critical role in ensuring that we're really helping people and helping our organization, the conditions of our organization be optimal so that people can really flourish. And so I would love to get your thoughts on that. And Kelly, thank you for letting me, just kind of riff on that with you because you're amazing. And one of the things that I love most about Kelly is for years and years and years, she has demonstrated in all three of those components of empathy at the exact right times. And that's what has made Kelly such an incredible HR leader for so many decades. So thank you, Kelly. But Marcus, your thoughts on, what are some of the other ways that a leader can really best support their organization? What's another maybe skill or two that their teams need to have to help usher their organization into this new reality of AI?
Well, one thing I'll point out, Corey, this is going to sound somewhat counterintuitive, but I really believe the more that we embrace these new technologies and these new tools, the more human our interactions can actually become. Let me give you an example. I talk to chief human resource officers frequently, and some of the more tenured ones, we'll put it that way, that have been doing this for a while are really resistant to some of these new tools. So I will say, hey, listen, you can get a chatbot on your device that you can give to your entire workforce, and they can go get everything they need from this chatbot. And they're like, I don't like that. I don't want that. HR is supposed to be high touch, We're supposed to be available for, we're just telling them to go to a chatbot. That sounds really impersonal and really inhuman. And I'm like, yeah, but when they're asking what's my PTO balance, they don't care to have a human answer that
They just
question.
want to know. Yes.
Yeah. What they care about is when they say, hey, look, my mother-in-law just died. I don't know
Mm,
what to do. Do we have bereavement policy here? I need to
yeah.
talk to somebody. And because you offloaded all of those transactional questions and requests, you have people in your organization that are available to the workforce in a more
Yeah.
meaningful way.
I love
Does that
that.
make
I love it.
sense?
And it totally does. And, my goodness, how many conversations have you and I had about the structure of trust? Three building blocks: competency, problem solving, care for others. When you have that mindset, you will open up a whole world of opportunity to demonstrate authentic care for others. PTO balance, I need somebody to communicate this to me because I got a problem that I got to solve. And that is, I need to figure out how much time I've got left before Christmas.
Yeah.
Versus what you just said, I can now activate that building block of caring for others, which this is when you have this convergence of yes, competency, whether AI or human, yes, problem solving, whether AI or human, but also care for others, which humans are the ones that are carrying the flag for care for others always. When we bring those three things together, that's when we create an organization that is not only high trust, but it's also high hope. And that's where people, they won't want to leave those organizations. They will be naturally innovative. They will have freedom and agency to be able to take the risk because there's a high level of trust. They're in an offense mode, not in an offensive reaction, and they can start to thrive, and they embrace change more readily. They like the nuance more readily because they know that they can move through this snowy field and create their own post holes so that people can walk behind them. Or if they begin to go off track, then they've got a supportive leader or a team that says, actually, we need to go this way. Okay, then let's go this way. So I think that I really appreciate what you just said there in terms of the opportunity to move away from some of those critical problem solving tasks to more of a high level of care for others. I know that we've got a couple of comments that have come in. Question from Paul and Heather. One of the things I would love for you to share is you talked about the core police versus helping more coaches, like employee supportive role. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. But Paul, I'm going to give you a moment to reflect on that. But Paul, before we let Heather speak into that, I want to give the opportunity for Marcus to answer your question. So I'm loving the discussion of what is essentially the traps of AI, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We just need to make sure AI doesn't become a crutch the way PowerPoint has over the last 30 years. Note to self, don't put the PowerPoint slides up here in the next 5 minutes. And then feel free to talk about this further. It does come back to trust. So Paul, and I am going to have to put up a couple of PowerPoint slides, but Marcus will let you answer that. And then Heather, we'd love to have you go a little bit deeper on this whole idea of shifting to more of an employee supportive role. Marcus, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great point that he makes that there is the potential for us to become overly reliant on some of these tools. In fact, they're already doing some studies to see for those individuals that are using more of these new technologies like generative AI, are they seeing a decline in their cognitive skills and abilities because they're outsourcing that work to a technology.
Mm-hmm.
And it's early days in those studies to determine whether or not it's actually having a material effect. But it comes back to what I mentioned earlier, like you don't you don't use Chat GPT and then copy and paste whatever you got from it and throw it into an email or an article or a presentation. It's a starting point. And now you get to start instead of the on the the 20-yard line, you're starting on the 50 to use a football analogy
Good.
because it's already gotten you halfway there. But
Yeah.
you still got to go the rest of the way. So there is a real risk in us becoming overly dependent on it and potentially not using enough of our creative capacity, which I think is probably one of the most valuable skills on the planet today, is
Yep.
people that are willing to be creative and innovative. And in order to do that, you got to take risks, which
Yep.
a lot of folks aren't willing to do because they don't have trust, Corey. So
Yep.
anyway, I could go down
Good.
that path for a long time, but that's my
That,
point of view.
that's good. Heather, I know that you do this with the teams that you work with, but what does it being in a more of an employee supportive role look like practically for you?
Oh, thank you. So I come from an HR background. I actually was a recruiter, full desk recruiter for Microsoft, and also was in a generalist role. So I
Mm,
have the utmost empathy, Kelly, for you and Marcus in the world of HR. I now actually, as Corey mentioned, am more in a consultative sales, business development type role for a lot of small businesses. That's GTM motion. Anyhow, so I've taken my experience and love of working together and supporting people in HR position, and now I'm in a more of a sales and business development role. So that being said, Corey, to answer your question or to answer your request there, what I love about this conversation and about AI is this ability to move from, because HR is often like tagged as like the hardcore police of these organizations that we work in. If
Mm,
HR calls you up, oh my gosh, scary, anxiety, fight or flight happens. Like, what am I doing wrong?
wow. Yep.
And how nice, how amazing would that be to shift that whole perception of what HR's purpose is in organizations to a place where you or employees can feel that they're going to receive the support of an authentic, like what you're saying, personalized, hey, how are
Mm,
you, how can I help you? You look like you're, struggling in these areas. Let's talk about it versus like, oh, here's a pip, go fix it. But there is like true
yeah.
like human connection and time that's given in a more of a generalist type of fashion, right? And even
yeah,
the leadership and development can flourish more and be supported more, right, Corey? That'd be amazing.
absolutely. It's so true.
Yeah, so that's what I am absolutely hopeful and optimistic about after this conversation with you all.
That's awesome, Heather. Thank you for sharing that. And I think when we think about the how that role of HR is shifting to more of a supportive, I love what you said about it's shifting the purpose of HR. Like that's
Yeah.
wow. Like we get to shift the purpose of HR. We get to.
Yeah.
Marcus, I know that we're at about 1,000 feet above, like we're approaching the airport here as we're getting ready to land this. I want to give you an opportunity to provide kind of a concluding set of comments. Before we do that, a couple of quick housekeeping items. In the chat, I am sending you all a LinkedIn invitation to our December Trust Lab. And I'm very, very excited for this December Trust Lab. I'm going to pull up a slide. Paul, give me some grace here on this PowerPoint. Got a couple of slides here. I know that you will. But I'm very excited to invite Sarah Thurber into the conversation next December. She is an expert in all things problem solving. She literally, her company, it's called Foresight, and they have 6 million data points on how people solve problems. And they have a methodology to show that there are 4 distinct ways that people approach problems. It is amazing. She's got a book out called Good Teams, Bad Teams. She's going to be joining us on December 18th. So, my encouragement to you is to click on that link that I just sent you in the chat. Get registered so it's on your calendar. I'll send you a reminder a day or two out in advance of it, December 18th at 10 a.m. Central. Also, I'm going to put this very, very quickly, my final slide, and then Marcus, we're going to let you close our timeout. I want to make sure that I'm always providing a resource for you and as a way to say thank you. If you click on the QR code or if you go to dot.card/trustcentric, it will give you full and free access to this online course that is professionally produced by Intrepid Creative, who is on this call. Thank you guys so much. We filmed this a couple of years ago, and I still use it all of the time. It's 90 minutes. It's fully free. You don't even have to log in. It's just a hidden YouTube playlist, and you can share it with anybody that you like. So click on the QR code or go to that link. And with that, Marcus, I just want to give you the opportunity to close our time out, but also say thank you. Thank you for your friendship, for your leadership in this space, for the hope that you bring in so many different venues, whether in the professional context, globally, corporately, or more in smaller settings like this. We're so grateful for your time. So with that, Marcus, go ahead and close our time out, and then we will say goodbye to all. So go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, Corey, just one last comment. I want to build on what Heather was just talking about and what the gentleman from Intrepid Creative put in the chat. What I'm really looking forward to is how technology has the potential to actually proactively nudge us to help us give people better experiences at work. So, you know, again, the example in the chat of, hey, what if the chatbot reached out to the manager and said, hey, your employee just asked me about bereavement pay. You might want to talk to them. Think about us doing that from a flight risk perspective. Hey, Megan hasn't taken any kind of discretionary courses in the LMS in a long time. She's been late to work a lot. Her last 3 performance reviews were bad. She hasn't had a comp increase in a long time. You might need to reach out to her. And here's what you should ask her about. Don't just, the technology won't just say, hey, go talk to Megan. It'll say, go talk to Megan and ask her these 3 things. So the tech can actually make us more human. And in our, again, very counterintuitive. It's going to happen. And I'm glad that people are recognizing that.
I love that. Marcus, I know many people probably want to be able to follow you, connect with you. What is the best way, whether through LinkedIn, your website?
LinkedIn's great.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, look up Marcus on LinkedIn, connect with him. He's got an amazing Hope at Work newsletter. It is phenomenal. So when you connect with them, be sure to subscribe to that newsletter as well. So with that, I want to say thank you all for your time today, which is a gift that you would give it to this conversation. And thank you for helping co-create it through the participation in the poll and your comments and just your overall engagement. Marcus, thank you so much. And thank you for all that you do in order to help bring more hope at work through these practical things like AI and HR. So with that, hopefully we'll see you all next month, December 18th, as we welcome Sarah Thurber into the Trust Lab. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Corey.